Hi everyone, welcome to Lola's Frugal Life. This is episode number 68. Today we're going to be talking about vacationing on a budget. So please stick around for a few quick words from our sponsor and we'll get right into today's episode. Okay, so welcome to today's episode on vacationing and day trips and long weekends on a budget. So before we get into the main topic for today, I always share my frugal tip of the week when I do my main topic episodes, which are on Mondays. So this tip of the week is regarding regarding like storage baggies and sandwich baggies. So I guess, I don't know, a while ago, I was in Target one day and I saw the sandwich baggies. They had really inexpensive ones that were like the kind with like the fold over top. And I had forgotten that they even made those. I think I hadn't seen them since I was like a kid. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that those even existed because I had been so used to just always buying Ziploc everything for the longest time. So I wound up buying those and using them just like to take sandwiches to work. Because I was like, well, why does it need to be like really sealed with this Ziploc when I'm putting it in a sandwich baggie from when I leave the house in the morning till I eat it a few hours later at lunch at work, and then I'm just tossing it in the garbage. And it's not like it's a sandwich. It's not going to be like falling out of the bag or whatever if it's like in your lunch bag. So I wound up buying those, and I saved a lot of money on buying those. Of course, it's better to do reusable. Which I do for the most part because I'm usually not bringing sandwiches. I'm usually bringing like leftovers from a meal and I'll put it in like a Ziploc container or something. But those less expensive sandwich baggies are definitely worth it. There's really no reason that you need to buy more expensive sandwich baggies just to bring a sandwich to work or to maybe pack your kids' lunch or whatever. And then another one related to the same thing is the storage baggies. I started using those for the most part to freeze meat and other items in the freezer rather than the freezer bags, which are more expensive. And the reason I started doing that is because I saw someone, I think someone on YouTube that I watch said that she uses the regular storage bags to freeze meat and not the freezer bags if she's freezing something for a short term. And for the most part, I'm always freezing for a short term because I usually buy food for the upcoming week. And then whatever's left over, if I buy like a bigger package and I'm not using the whole thing, it usually winds up getting used up within a couple weeks tops after that. If I know something's going to be in there much longer, I will put it in a freezer bag, but that's not normally the case. Usually it's something that's not going to be in the freezer very long, and it works totally fine. I haven't had any trouble with using a storage bag to store meat as opposed to using a freezer bag. So that's my frugal tip of the week. Okay, so let's get into vacations. So no matter if you're planning for a day trip, a long weekend, or a regular week's vacation, you need to make sure that you set a budget. Because if you don't have a budget for your vacation, there's a really good chance you're going to end up spending more than you think. You're out having fun, you're just paying for things, you know, you're going to this place, going to that place, buying this drink, getting this snack. Things just add up so quickly when you're on vacation. And if you don't have a budget in mind, you're just more likely than not, you're going to wind up spending more than you expected. And a vacation is supposed to be a stress reducer. So you don't want to cause yourself stress while you're on your trip, while you're paying for all these things and spending too much money because you really don't have any idea in your head of what the budget even is for this vacation. It's a terrible feeling to get back from a vacation and that you really had a great time on and then having to try and recoup from spending more than you could really afford. It's so much better to have a budget and know what you're going to spend and know what you want to spend and just enjoy your vacation and know that the money that you're spending has already been set aside for and you don't have to be worried about any of your finances that are going to be impacted when you get back from your trip. I do want to point this out too. Just because you're budgeting for your vacation does not mean that you're being cheap on your vacation. You can budget for a frugal family getaway, or you can budget for an expensive anniversary trip, like a once-in-a-lifetime type trip. It's not about the cost of the vacation. It's about determining how much you can afford and setting a limit, because unless you have an unlimited source of funds, you need a budget. You need to know like what you're expecting to spend and keep to some sort of plan. Otherwise, it's very difficult to know if you're going to have enough money to cover this trip. So, just because you're managing your money doesn't mean you're being cheap. Like, that drives me crazy. A lot of times I might mention my budget and people will think that means I'm being cheap. And I don't feel that because you're on a budget, it means you're being cheap. It just means you're managing your money to a set dollar amount that you want to spend. So I think it's really important to set a budget for your vacation. So when you're planning your budget for your vacation, make sure to really consider everything. I have like a spreadsheet that I keep, in Excel, where I keep my vacation budget. And I have it actually going back for several years. I have actually probably since I started doing it. I don't even know how long, but I'll create like a new tab in the sheet whenever there's a new vacation coming up. And I have categories in there like pet boarding, transportation, hotel parking fees, dining out, snacks and drinks, souvenirs, tickets, like for like theme parks, museums, things like that. As many categories of major items that you can think of, you want to list out in the budget so that you can detail those out and try not to miss any of the major things. And give yourself plenty of time in advance of your trip to start setting up the budget. That way, if you're driving down the road and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't think to include this in the budget, you can go back and update it. And, it's fun too. Like, I love creating the vacation budget because in order to create the budget, a lot of times you're doing research about attractions that are in the area, things you might want to do. And when you're doing that part's fun, but then you can also look at what the cost is for those attractions and put them in the budget. And this can also help you prioritize. Like, say if there's like, I don't know, say 5 different museums in the area and they're all, I don't know, say $20 a person or whatever, and you have a family of 5. Well, maybe you don't want to spend $500 on museums while you're on your trip. So now that you know the cost of them all, you can say, okay guys, here's the 5 museums they have in the area. Let's pick 2 that we really want to see. So it can kind of help you prioritize where you want to spend your money before you go on the trip, because otherwise, you might wind up hitting 2 of the ones that you liked but weren't like the one you really, really would have liked to see. And then all of a sudden you see that there's this other one and you're like, oh, well, that stinks because we already spent $200 on seeing the first 2 and I don't really want to spend another $100 on this one. So, just kind of knowing in advance some of the things you might want to do and setting them as a priority can really be helpful in being able to stick to your budget once you're out there and kind of knowing what you want to do. So I always do include miscellaneous dollars in my budget for my vacation. You can figure out what amount that might be, of course, based on the total dollar amount that you have allocated for your vacation. But the thing is that pretty much always something miscellaneous comes up while you're on the trip. Like, you might be walking around town and you want to get some like fancy dessert or like some kind of nice lattes or something, I don't know, like all those little things can add up. And you really want to make sure you have some miscellaneous dollars in your budget to cover those things that you didn't specifically think of. Maybe there's some exhibit that you're walking through town and you see that there's something that you'd really like to go do. You could pull that from your miscellaneous category. So when you're putting your budget together, if you add miscellaneous dollars and that throws you over the total cost, like once you list out, like if you have pet boarding, transportation, the hotel, park tickets, like if you're going to a theme park, whatever, once you list all that out and then you add in the miscellaneous dollars, if your total budget comes to more than you wanted to spend by adding those miscellaneous dollars, I would suggest seeing if you can cut somewhere else, because you really need to have miscellaneous dollars in there, because I find that if you don't, you always will wind up going over budget, because something miscellaneous always comes up. I mean, you know how that is. You're on a trip and things just come up that you weren't expecting, and you're like, oh, we're on vacation, so let's just do it anyway. And you really want to have some dollars in there. So, I mean, if you put in your little miscellaneous budget and it throws you over, you can consider, can you maybe cut back on dining a little bit on your dining budget? Can you maybe do some less expensive meals or things like that? Just kind of really think it through and see where you might be able to cut back a little bit to still keep those miscellaneous dollars in your budget, because it's really important to have that. As you know, I'm sure, dining is usually one of the largest expenses in your budget. That's kind of variable. The hotel is going to cost what it is. Once you pick your hotel, you know what the cost is of that. You're kind of going to know what it costs if you have to board your animals. Transportation, you're going to get a fixed cost for that also. But dining is really flexible in as far as the amount of cost that you can spend on vacation. So what I do for this area is I budget a flat dollar amount for dining per day. And then that way, at the end of the day, you can see how you track to budget. It's very simple enough to add up what you've spent in a day for dining. And if you have a dollar amount that you've set aside for dining per day, you can easily compare how you stacked up. And it makes it so much easier to do it that way, because if you wanted to, say if you overspent, say you're on your first day of vacation and you went out to a real nice restaurant for dinner, and maybe you had like a more expensive lunch, and I don't know, maybe you even went out and got like nice coffee drinks and some kind of fancy little pastries or something for breakfast, and you're like, wow, we went way over our budget for dining today. Well, then tomorrow you can maybe just grab a bagel for breakfast, maybe like share a pizza for lunch. You can have a lot more flexibility in playing with that dining budget as if you're kind of tracking it on a daily basis. At least for me, it helps me do it on a daily basis, because I can make adjustments easily the next day to get us back on track. And I'll usually kind of plan it out that way, really. Like if we know there's, say, certain restaurants that we really want to go to, we'll say, okay, we're going to do these restaurants on these days. And so that we can afford those, we're going to do less expensive meals on these other days. And then I still do track it, though, to make sure that we're staying on target. But I find it easier that way than doing the dining budget as a whole and trying to figure out, like, okay, we're in day 3, how much left do we have for the rest of the trip, and then trying to see, okay, well, if we do better this day, worse that day, whatever. I mean, I do track it as a whole also, but as far as a way to stay on track, I find that it's much easier to kind of have a daily limit, and if you go over one day, then kind of bring yourself back under the following day. I also another thing too. In order to keep on track with this also, what I'll do sometimes is before going on vacation, I'll look up local restaurants and things like that and get reviews, so that you kind of have some places in mind before you even go on your trip of where you can eat that might be less expensive. So I'll sometimes do a search for best cheap eats in whatever area. And you can get some good options that might be less expensive places to eat, so that if you do have a day where you maybe overspent a little bit on dining, you can have a few good places in mind that you can stop and get a good meal for a maybe less expensive price, and kind of help you offset the cost of the previous day. I always buy lots of snacks and drinks to bring with us on vacation, if we can bring it with us, if we're driving to the location, or when we get to where we're going, we'll go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of snacks and drinks like that. Or if you don't have a car, say if you're staying at Disney or something and you don't have transportation to leave, if you're just staying on site, do a grocery delivery order. Because just by having snacks and drinks with you wherever you're staying can really save you a lot of money, of not having to run out and buy those things every time you need them. Another thing to consider too, as far as dining, is depending on where you're staying, if you can get a room with a kitchen, if possible, that can really save you a lot of money, depending on the number of people too that you have. It of course costs more for a room with a resort room, or I don't know, whatever type of combination you're staying in. If you're camping, like a cabin or whatever, things like that, they cost more to have a kitchen, of course. But if you have a large family and you're going to be spending a lot on eating out, it can actually wind up being worth it to have a kitchen. And it doesn't mean you need to be cooking on your vacation. If you're okay with doing like cheap, inexpensive things from the food store here and there, like popping a frozen pizza in the oven, or buying some frozen meals, things like that. Even just having like the drinks in the fridge. You could buy like a box of donuts, like whatever, I don't know. Just things like that, having them available in the kitchen, and to have like maybe some quick breakfast or some quick lunches. It's also good for when you do eat out to have a place to come back and save your leftovers, because it's the worst if you go out and have an expensive meal and you can't finish it, and then you have nowhere to bring the leftovers back to. So it's nice for that also. So if that's an option and if it's affordable, that's one thing to consider, which can help you a little bit saving on your dining costs if you're looking to save in those areas. Okay, packing list. Definitely, I would suggest using a packing list when you pack for your vacation. So, by having a packing list, it's going to make it much less likely that you're going to have to purchase something, which can throw you over budget while you're on your vacation. Like if you forget a bathing suit, a hat, sunblock, whatever, if you have to buy those in the vacation area or at a resort, it's obviously going to cost you much more money, and you're buying something that you didn't need to buy because you already had it at home, you just forgot to pack it. So I definitely suggest using a packing list, and that way you'll make sure that you aren't likely to leave something behind and having to purchase it while you're on your trip. So I keep my packing list also saved in Excel. And then what I've done over the years is each time we go on a trip, if we're there and we're like, oh shoot, we didn't think to pack like bug spray or something, I don't know. We camp a lot. So if we're like, oh, I can't believe we didn't bring bug spray on this camping trip where we were going to be hiking and whatever. When I get back, I'll make a note in my phone. I'll write down add bug spray to packing list. And then as soon as I get home, I go into the packing list and then I add it. So over the years, we've really tweaked it. So it pretty much covers everything we could need for any situation. I have a section of it that says winter trips, summer trips, whatever. And then obviously, depending on the trip we're going on, I might just ignore some of the items on the list. But it's really good to have a thorough list that you can print out and check off, as you're packing for your trip, to eliminate forgetting those things that you might have to purchase while you're out there. So that's that. And then tracking your expenses. When you're on your trip, you really should have some mechanism to track your expenses, because as you know, with your regular budget, it's really hard to know how you're doing, just to try and add things up in your head. You forget about things. It's just hard to do, and it's not something that you want to be doing on your vacation, like sitting there adding up in your head trying to figure out what you've spent so far, what you have left to spend. So I would suggest having some way, either at the end of the night, if you just maybe you just keep all your receipts in your wallet or whatever, and at the end of the night you come back and you log it all. For the day, I wouldn't recommend going more than a day because things just add up way too quickly. But what I use is actually an app called Budget. I think it's just called Budget. And I use the free version, so it only gives you 3 categories. It probably would be better for me to upgrade and get the paid version, but I don't even know what it costs. It might only be a few dollars. I really don't know. But I just use the free version, so I get 3 categories. So when I go on vacation, I set up 3 categories, which is meals, gas, and miscellaneous. Meals is usually the biggest one. Gas is next, I don't know, not next, but it's kind of a defined category. And then miscellaneous just kind of covers our things attractions and other things that we might spend that aren't food or gas, which is pretty much what you're spending when you're on vacation. So what I do is every time we're out, I enter in the dollars that I spent. Say if we go out to eat, the second we're done and we paid the bill, I just pull up the app on my phone and I enter in the date, the restaurant, and the dollar amount we spent. and then I can look at it during the day and see how much we've spent so far and what we are expected to spend. And it just helps me keep on track and not having to put too much thought and trying to sit there thinking and remembering, what we spent so far. And it just helped. It's really helpful. Of course, anyway, you could use the notes in your phone. Like, I'm sure there's other apps too that you can track your expenses in, of course. But I would definitely recommend having some way to track your expenses while you're on the trip so that you can not have to worry if you're going over budget or not. It just feels good to know you're spending the money that you've already budgeted for this, and you're not expecting to go over. And if you are, you still have ways to control it by spending less in the upcoming days. And then once you get back from your trip, I definitely suggest recording everything back into your original budget. Like if you had like a detailed budget in Excel, taking all those costs and putting them in there in the appropriate categories. So I usually do like an actual to budget so that I can see, like what we spent and what we had budgeted, where we came in maybe a little over, where we came in a little under, and just kind of to have that information, because it's really helpful in budgeting future vacations. Like we were considering budgeting another trip, and I wanted to see how much it cost us for gas on a previous trip so that I could kind of get a rough idea of how much to budget for gas. So I was able to look back at the last couple trips and I was like, okay, this is probably a good amount to budget. So it can be really helpful by having those previous trips. And it also helps you just in general too, because you can see where you missed something. Was there something that you completely forgot to budget for? Well, now you can make a note and make sure you budget for that next time. So it takes time, but the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And it's just a really great feeling to be on vacation and know I have the money for this. I'm not going to come home and have to worry about like how much we spend and how are we going to recover from this. You don't want that to be the result of your vacation. You want it to be enjoyable, and you want to know that you're spending the money that you already set aside, and this money's allocated for this, and it's okay to spend it because it's budgeted for. That's why I definitely think it's super important to have a budget for your vacation. And like I said, this applies to week-long vacations, day trips, and even long weekends. Whenever you're going out, that's when you tend, like for entertainment type purposes, that's when you tend to get those like, oh, well, it's a once in a lifetime thing. And then you just spend money you don't have. So I would suggest applying this to any of those type leisure activities that you have coming up. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really appreciate you listening so much. If you'd like to message me or send me any topic suggestions, any feedback on the episodes, I would really love to hear from you. You can message me through my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Lola's Frugal Life, no apostrophe. And you can message me there. You can like the page if you want to see anything that gets posted on there. Right now, the main Facebook page mainly just has recipes from my meal planning episodes. And then there's also a link on there to join our private listeners group, which would be really great if you'd like to join. We talk about things that are discussed on the episodes, and we could talk about anything related to, productivity, frugal living, any of those types of related topics. So you can join by the link on the Facebook group, or you can go directly to facebook.com/Lola's Frugal Life. facebook.com/groups/Lola's Frugal Life and submit a request to join. I would love to have you. Also, if you did like the show, don't forget to subscribe. And if you would like to, please leave a review. I would really appreciate it. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.